UX.
Sorry, we should, yeah.
That's all right. I lead the UX and design organization for the cloud and network security business at Cisco. My team is about 75 people across product design, design research, design operations, and content. And we're distributed all over the world. We've got folks in Bangalore, in Israel, and all over the United States and Canada. I've been in the UX field for over 25 years, which sounds crazy to say. It just makes me feel really old. You know, I've sort of run the gamut of enterprise software. I've had a UX agency on my own. I've done a lot of consulting work, everything from Canadian and US military to Disney Interactive and McDonald's and, you know, big clients. Tried my hand at startup for a while and was a startup CEO and raised some seed funding and took a go at that. And now I'm back in enterprise security software, which is, I think, where I've probably spent the bulk of my career. And frankly, that's where I met Tim very, very early on in my career. Why don't I pass it over to you, Tim?
Hi, my name's Tim Gage. So I'm a UX contractor. What that means is that I work full-time as a UX person for companies, but I usually only work for them for between 3 and 12 months at a time. So I come in, they hire me to do a specific task or work on a specific project. I work like crazy for them. And then when the project's done, usually that's it for me and I'm gone. But quite often they will invite me back the next year to do it again. So right now I'm the senior UX designer at Sask Power. So Sask Power is basically the BC Hydro of Saskatchewan. So they're the company in Saskatchewan that provides everybody with their electricity. And I'm the senior designer there. And basically my job is to do all the UX work for their customer service portal. So Sask Power has about 500,000 customers. And my job is to do all the UX planning for them, create the UX roadmap, do all the user research, all the UX research, run all their workshops for them, facilitate all those workshops, and manage all their design thinking processes, do the UI design, and I do usability testing, and also I'm building a design system for them. So that's what I'm doing right now. And I've been doing that since the beginning of the year, and I'll probably be on that contract till the end of this year. And I may come back next year and do more work for them. Anyway, prior to getting into working for Sask Power, I've worked for a number of different companies doing UX work, but I got into UX late in my career. So I got into UX at the end of 2015, beginning of 2016. In the last 5 years, I've been very fortunate to work for some great companies, including BC Hydro, Jungle Scout, and Bluestream Software. And I've done a little bit of work for Cisco and the Land Title Survey Authority of BC. So that's basically the main information about me. My fun fact is that my original training or education was in biology. So I took a biology degree in London, England, with a specialization in entomology, and never had any use for that knowledge at all in my career. But just in the last few weeks, that's become useful for me because my house has been invaded by carpenter ants. So I'm dealing with that situation, basically doing a lot of observing of ants and usability testing of pesticides and a bit of design thinking about how to get rid of them. So that's my fun fact, I guess.
Okay, wow, that's great. Yeah, it's really going to be really interesting to learn more about how did you transition, Tim, into UX, and what made you interested even, right?
Yeah, that's a great question.
Oh, may I ask, for those people who are not speaking, could you please turn off your mic first? Yeah, so we don't have other noises. Thank you.
Yeah, so before I got into UX, I worked for a number of years in the graphic design industry, graphic design, branding, digital design. But my role there was an account manager and a business development person. So I was responsible for managing projects, but also doing all the sales work beforehand and bringing in new clients. What got me interested in UX is that when we were doing our digital design projects, we had the organization I work for, the graphic design firm I work for, we had a kind of a shortfall in our ability to really understand some of the more sort of deeper needs of our clients, but especially the needs of their customers. I started doing some research into how we could fill that need, and I stumbled across UX. So that was in around sort of 2013. And so I found some UX people to come and work for our agency on a contract basis. And the more I learned about what they did, and the more I saw them working for our clients, the more interested I became in the field. And around the time of 2014, I started to think, you know what, this could be a career that I might be interested in. You know, I had already built up a really great career in the industry that I was in. And I was really afraid of throwing all that away and starting and doing a completely new, getting into a new profession. So I didn't really want to make a mistake by getting into something that I wouldn't be suited for. So I spent about a year actually making the decision about whether I would get into UX or not. And during that time frame, I did a lot of research into the profession. I talked to people that were doing UX, and I tried to figure out whether the profession of UX, whether I would be suited to that. After about a year of thinking about it, I decided that yes, I would be suited to it. But I figured that at that point, I figured that, you know, in UX, you could really do two types of things. You could either be a designer or a UX researcher. And I thought that I would be well suited to doing UX research. So that's the first thing. So what I would recommend to anybody that's thinking about getting into UX, really do your due diligence and find out what UX it really involves, and find out whether you're going to be suited to those kinds of activities. Mm-hmm. So the second thing that I did to get into UX was some training. So I'm sure that a lot of people have been through this process of deciding, you know, what training to get. For me, you know, I knew it was going to be a fairly hefty financial investment. So, you know, just like when you're shopping for anything else, I did a bunch of research first on what courses would be best for me. And I spoke to UX people that had done UX courses and asked them what they thought of those courses. And then I actually asked some UX people to help me to pick out the courses that would be right for me. And after doing my research, I decided to get to do my training with Nielsen Norman Group in the US. And I chose them because I felt that I would get a very strong grounding in UX theory, and I would get the training that I needed quite quickly. So that's what I chose them. It was going to be expensive, and it was going to require some travel, because back in those days, you couldn't do Nielsen Norman Group training remotely. But anyway, that's what I decided was going to be the right for me. And it did, in fact, give me a really great grounding in UX theory. I don't know if you've heard of Nielsen Norman Group before, but they're kind of the grandfathers of UX research. So I, you know, highly recommend that if you're interested in doing more training or getting some training for the first time, I highly recommend you take a look at them. The one problem with Nielsen Norman Group is they do not do any practical training. So having done my training, there was no way I was going to get work in the industry without getting some practical experience first. You know, and a lot of people who are trying to get into UX have this problem. You're not going to get fired. So you're not going to get hired unless you have some experience first. But if you don't have an experience, how do you get hired? It's sort of a chicken and egg problem. Mm. So the way I decided to solve that problem for me was by volunteering. So I had a friend that had been in the nonprofit sector for many, many years, and she helped hook me up with some nonprofit organizations that needed UX help. So they had real projects that they needed help with, but they had no money to pay a UX person. And I was able to offer them my UX services, in return for, I was basically agreed to work for them for free, in return for being able to use my work in a portfolio. So I did this for about 6 months, and it was really crucial to me because it helped me sort of embed what I'd learned during my training. When you learn, you have to learn by doing half the time, and so getting this practical experience was really crucial in terms of getting that Nielsen-Norman group theory really embedded in my brain. I was able to build a portfolio of real projects, but also something that I didn't quite expect was that I had this very strong sense of reward at being able to help some organizations that had a strong need, and they were doing very good things. I worked for an organization that helps homeless people. In fact, they actually take care of homeless children here in Vancouver. So I got to do usability testing with homeless children, which was an incredible eye-opener to me about a world that I knew nothing about. I also work for an environmental organization that lobbies the government to protect coastal environments and forests. So I was really happy to be contributing and helping them too. And to be honest with you, I would have continued doing all of that for free. I was just so delighted to be doing UX for the first time. But in fact, after about 6 months, my first paid opportunity came along. So, which was actually kind of quicker than I expected. But
So-
one thing, sorry, go ahead.
So how many pieces of portfolio piece were you able to put together in those 6 months of volunteering work?
3.
3, okay.
But, yeah, but they weren't good. I mean, they were real projects, but I was new, and I was working alone, right? They didn't have UX teams that I could work within, so I had to kind of be a complete self-starter here. And these people knew even less about UX than I did, so I had to walk them through what UX was, and that was good practice for me actually, because I had to explain UX. I had to convince them that UX would be valuable to them. But the projects themselves, any newcomer to UX, your first few projects are going to be not great. That's inevitable. It's because you don't have that much experience.
So how far along were you in your first career, like in 2013 when you first kind of knew about UX? Was it 15 years or?
Okay, yeah. So that's an interesting question. I kind of don't really like to publicize this too much, but okay. I'd already done 3 careers before I decided to get into UX, and I already had been working in various different industries for 25 years before I decided to do UX. Mm-hmm. What I'd like to say to everybody today is that that 25 years of experience that I had before I got into UX never helped me at all in getting a job in UX. And I think, maybe I'm, different from other people, but I don't think so. I think from what I experienced was that employers are interested in whether you can do the job of UX. So they're not particularly interested in the fact that you've got experience in this, that, or the other. They just want to know if you can come in and do the UX for the projects that they expect you to do, and not, screw it up. But I will say this, that the projects that I worked on and the 5 years that I've spent in UX, the prior experience that I had was incredibly valuable to me in doing that work. But that's just not what's going to sell you to employers. What's going to sell you to them is your demonstrated ability to do UX work, not anything you've done in the past.
Okay, yeah. The reason why I was asking you is to encourage people who are latecomers, who are switching their careers like late in their career. more encouragement. Okay, why don't we
Yeah.
put the question to Jason? Okay. So the reason why we have Jason here is because Jason is representing the hirer's perspective. And I understand that a lot of large companies, especially, do not hire inexperienced UX people. Is there a reason why? Can you explain, Jason?
Yeah, we're the nasty big corporations that aren't hiring hiring all you good folks that are they're trying to get jobs. Let me tell you a little bit about my perspective on that, right? Like even though I have a very large team, we service a lot of different products, and you know my team is 75 people. About 30 of those are content folks and tech docs folks, and the rest are design folks. So let's call it 45 designers up against about 1,500 engineers in our part of the business, right? So even though we have a very large team, we're incredibly under-resourced. And not only are we under-resourced on projects, but we're also under-resourced in trying to do new things, right? We're trying to establish design operations practices, and we're trying to establish storytelling as part of our process. And we're starting to, you know, trying to introduce new roles onto the teams. All of these things lead to an under-resourced design team. So when I do have the ability to add somebody new to the team, budget is less of a constraint for me, really, right? Like if I'm going to add a single person, the difference in me acquiring budget for a junior person versus a more senior person, it's not a big deal. I can typically get more budget to get an intermediate or late career person. And the things that I need to look at are two things. One is being under-resourced. I really do need people who can come in and hit the ground running, right? I need to be able to put people on projects and have them work primarily unsupervised and be able to lead work on their own. So those more junior roles aren't going to work there. The other thing that we've run into in the past is, you know, we want to help new people break into their careers. We feel terrible that we can't hire early career folks. But when we've tried to do it, we've also run into problems where we've disrupted entire teams, because when you bring that more junior person in, either you give them a really crappy experience of little mentorship and little guidance, and they're sort of left fending for themselves, which is not a great you know, experience for them, or there's a lot of burden put on the other members of the team who are already overworked and, you know, trying to meet sort of demanding deadlines, and they're forced to try and pick up some of the slack and help their more junior teammate. So it becomes a real challenge for us to find the right opportunities to bring in those folks. Where we are able to contribute is through internship programs. And so we you know, Cisco as a whole is very active in internship programs. We have entire teams who engage with universities all across the world to take candidates in, and you know, those internship programs are even funded outside of my team. Like those are funded at a central Cisco level. And so every year we do our best to take on as many interns as we can, and that's our way of you know, focusing on trying to help develop early career folks and talent. And the way that we also do that is by finding people on our team who are looking for growth opportunities and leadership opportunities. And so we make sure that we sort of create those mappings of, hey, here's somebody who wants to emerge as a leader or a manager on the team. Let's make sure we get an intern on that team so that they can provide the mentorship and guidance as a stretch assignment for them to grow.
Jason, I just want to clarify, when you say intern, because I know in Canada, intern means they're from school, they're in a program, right? So the issue is we have senior career changers who's not in school, right? So how do you deal with that? And have you hired people in those areas? Like, and how did you do that?
Yeah, and this again is part of the, I guess, systemic problem that exists, right? Is the programs that are geared around early career folks really are geared around these internship programs, which are tied to schools. Yep. And so we don't have an opportunity to take an intern in that's not coming out of a university program. Like that's just the way that it's structured. So it is very difficult for us to take somebody into that kind of early career mentorship or intern opportunity for someone who's switching careers, which is part of this problem, right? Why it's so difficult to crack. And just like Tim was saying, you know, Tim was saying, his 25 years of previous experience was not going to get him a job in UX. And I would agree. You know, I look at a candidate's ability based on their portfolio and the work that they've done. And I've learned time and time again that there's this huge gap between the theory and the things that we learn in school and in boot camps and in programs, and applying those things in a real world environment. Like out in the wild, it's a completely different story than in school, you know? And so I'm not only looking for someone who has a portfolio that proves that they can push the pixels around in a way that makes sense and is meaningful, but even more important than that, I need to know that someone deeply understands the design process and has at least a little bit of experience in applying that design process in a real world environment where you've got engineers who, you know, think you're wasting their time by trying to evangelize for research, and you've got tight deadlines, and, you know, you've got product managers who are essentially just telling you, hey, wireframe this solution, I've already got it figured out. You know, those are all situations that require some experience to be able to navigate, or it requires somebody else on the team to help you navigate it. And then we're back into that situation of, you know, resource constraints on my side.
Well, can you explain a little bit about like how Cisco structure works? Because like, you know, in the old days, agencies had senior designer, mid-level, junior, intern, like there are levels, right? But it sounds like nowadays job description is like full stack designer, and that like it's like unicorn designer who can code and research and you know, program and, you know, design and also do marketing as well. So can you explain a bit about how you guys work at Cisco?
Yeah, so there's, I guess, a couple different aspects to that question. The level aspect of that question is, yes, we do have you know, well-defined levels that go right from a very junior person right out of school to intermediate, senior, principal, senior principal, and that's on the individual contributor track. We also have a management track that is, you know, once you get up to a senior designer, you have the opportunity of staying an individual contributor, which would move you to a principal and senior.
Oops, we're not hearing you. Maybe it's, I think you muted yourself.
Oh,
yeah, maybe
that was weird.
1 second.
So so you are able to go up to a senior manager or a senior principal designer, and then beyond that, it is the equivalent of director level roles. So I'm a senior director. So we have director, senior director, vice president, senior vice president. And there again, we have the ability of moving through those roles as a leader or a manager or as an individual contributor. And so we have very well established director and senior director level roles for engineers in the company as individual contributors. And one of the projects I'm working on right now are establishing those roles for individual contributor designers, because we don't have any of those in Cisco, and we're trying to break through on that front so that folks can not need to go into a management role to continue to grow, you know, up to be executive level.
Okay. So have you ever hired a senior career changer? You know, and are these people different from the junior UXers?
Yeah, so one area where we have had a lot of success in hiring a person was on the research side. So as a UX researcher, and they came from a psychology background. And so they had a lot of experience in terms of academic research. And I think I saw someone in the chat who actually mentioned that they were looking to make that sort of transition. And I think that's a real great example of where your experience is incredibly valid, and it's not a huge shift to move from academic research into UX research. And we were able to bring that candidate in, and they were able to be productive, you know, really quickly with very little guidance. And in fact, I would say they probably contributed more back to the team as a result of their background than we had to nurture them, you know, to get them to be productive. So that was a really good example of it. But on the design side, I think that we've had the most success in visual designers who are wanting to make the transition into UX design. Mm-hmm. And so, you know, there we've had internal candidates who've wanted to make that shift, and we've been able to look at the work that they've done on products from a visual design perspective, and they were able to articulate how they were able to do aspects of UX design in their current role, and it made us much easier for us to find a role for them on the UX design side of the team.
So if they are coming from you, they want to do UX research, they don't have official background. What do you expect in the portfolio then? Is it mainly research projects?
If they are looking to do UX research, yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay. So questions for both of you. Like, is somebody with 5 years experience a senior UX designer? Because I see a lot of job postings, especially in Canada. It's like senior UX designer, 5 to 6 years experience. What are your thoughts?
Tim, do you want to field it first? Oh, you're muted.
So yeah, so I can only really speak from personal experience. I don't have the benefit of Jason's experience where he gets to meet and hire all these different people. But from my experience, I don't think that 5 years really does make you a senior UX designer. I mean, I guess it all depends what you mean by senior. But when I think about the more experienced UX people that I've worked with, I would say that I'm, after 5 years, 5.5 years, that I would consider myself only an intermediate. I know the people like Curtis Archer at Jungle Scout, an incredible senior UX person. I have a long way to go before I'll ever be as good as him, a very long way. I'm only just starting to master certain things. Sure, at the beginning of my career, I was able to master design tools. I had theory. I was able to do UX research very well. I got very good at doing usability testing very quickly. But there are things that take a lot longer to get good at. And for those kinds of things, I would say it may take you years to get good at them. And an example of that would be working in a cross-functional team and leading them through a process of understanding users, ideating solutions, and experimenting on those solutions and doing testing. That takes, and getting all those people on board, getting them to contribute their ideas and getting them aligned on how to approach something, and facilitating all of that and planning it out and convincing all those people to be involved, to give up their time to do these things. That's a really hard skill to learn how to do. And it's taken me quite a long time to get even moderately good at that. And the other thing is convincing an organization to do things in a certain way. So a lot of the places that I've worked had low UX maturity, and saying to them, hey, why don't we do it this way? Or why don't we do it that way? You get a lot of pushback. In fact, most of the time, they're not going to want to do it the way that you suggest. And being able to convince them is very, very hard. And getting that experience, I think, takes a long time. So I'm only just starting to get good at that. And that's why I don't really, even though I say on my resume and my LinkedIn profile, I say I'm a senior, because, frankly, in all the job opportunities, they say, a senior is someone with 5 or 6 year experience. I actually don't think that I will be a senior UX person until I've done maybe 10 years in the industry. That's my own take.
Yes.
Stacey, what do you think?
Yeah, there's two aspects to it for me. So if I were to look at my organization and look at the people who are senior designers on my team, I would completely agree with you, Tim, that the majority of them are 10 plus years of experience to be operating at that level. That being said, we put a big focus on inclusive hiring practices in our organization, and that means many things. And one of the things that it means is to focus less in the job description on those years of service and focus more on describing the behaviors that we're looking for, recognizing that we may be asking for 10 years experience for a senior. And it's interesting, we see data on some really interesting things, which is men will see that 10-year requirement and disregard it. If they have 5 years, they're going to apply. If they have 4 years, they're going to apply. But women tend to take those requirements very seriously. And if they see 10 years and they have 8 years, even though they have all the behaviors listed, they're not going to apply because they don't feel as though they're ready. And so we try to focus less on the years of service and more on the behaviors, recognizing that we want to make sure that we're not missing any great candidates who don't fit that criteria perfectly, and also recognizing that, yeah, there are folks out there who've been doing this for 6 years and are showing all of those skills and have built the level of experience that we're looking for. And we want to talk to those people, you know, just as much as someone who's got the 10 or 15 years.
Right. Yeah, I also see some of the participants are saying that it's really hard to get into the field. Do you have any advice for new entrants into UX? Especially people who have, already have a first, second, third career. Yeah.
I'd like to take that one, Jason. I think from my perspective, one of the most crucial things, if you want to get into UX and get hired, one of the most crucial things I would recommend to people is that you find mentors to support you. I was really lucky when I first made the switch into UX. I had two incredible mentors, and Jason was one of them, and Elizabeth Snowden was the other. Those people, I was lucky enough that those people actually believed in me. They thought that I had something that would provide value in the field of UX. And so they were able to assist me in getting my first few paid, gigs. And I think if I hadn't had those mentors, it would have taken me a lot longer to break in. I still have no doubt that I would have broken in, but it might have taken me 2 or 3 or even 4 times longer to get where I got to within 2 years if I hadn't had those great mentors. So I would highly recommend to anybody who's trying to get into the field and find work, find people to mentor you, get to know them, and don't necessarily expect that they will give you a job because they may not be in a position to be able to. But it's that kind of networking with people who are much more experienced than you, who are willing to take an interest in you, that will eventually open doors for you. So I highly recommend that you do that. Jason.
Yeah, to build on that idea, as designers, we're being trained to develop empathy for those who we're solving problems for, right? We're being trained to understand their needs and their challenges so that we can solve for them. It's no difference in the case of a new designer looking to get hired. Spend time building empathy for those people who are hiring those roles, right? And you will understand that a boot camp certificate or a school program is not going to be the ticket to getting hired. And to Tim's point, reach out to people and talk to them, not seeking employment, but seeking understanding about, hey, what are the things that you're looking for as an employer, and what are the things that you would evaluate as looking at an early career designer. Not only is it going to build those relationships, and you might be able to actually establish a more meaningful mentorship relationship with one or more of those folks, but you're gonna develop a deep understanding of what people are looking for, and then you can go and sort of fulfill those requirements, whether that's finding a few volunteer opportunities, or just doing some of your own work yourself, right? Like some of the advice that I give to people who are really, really early and they don't have a portfolio is I tell them, create a case study on your portfolio about designing your portfolio. What's the research that you're doing to understand what people want in a portfolio? And how are you learning to understand, who's consuming your portfolio and what is the audience and what are they looking for? I've seen people take my advice and it ends up being really cool because you've got this running case study of their portfolio evolving as they're learning more and more, and it ends up filling up their portfolio with a really nice project that's meaningful. So, look for creative opportunities where you can build experience doing the thing that we're trained to do.
So on the point of finding mentors, like Tim, how did you do it? Because senior designers are busy, right? They're already under-resourced with their team. Like, how do you convince them to become your mentor? Like,
yeah, that's a really good question. I think probably I was lucky in the sense that my previous career as someone who's essentially a business development person in the graphic design industry, in the branding industry, gave me a very, very good network of people. So my job for 12 years in the graphic design industry was to call up companies and talk to them about their needs, and then call up people who could supply the services to fulfill those needs. And I did that for 12 years, and I got moderately good at it, but I built an enormous network of people throughout Vancouver, because I only really was interested in working in the Vancouver marketplace. So that, I guess, probably was, that allowed me to find the right people to help. I mean, I was, of course, lucky that Jason and I have been friends for a long time, and he happens to be in UX. And I remember the first time I came to him and said, Jason, I'm thinking of getting into UX. I was kind of embarrassed because I'd known him for, a long time, and, we never really sort of taken that kind of an interest in his career. So I had to confess to him, Jason, I've kind of, had an epiphany about what you do, and I really want to do it too. And luckily, Jason said, oh, that's great. That's really cool. Tell me more about why you're interested. And, the conversation started from there.
Well, I want to ask you something, because as a senior career changer, I think one of those things is, I also have friends who've gone through this, is there's an ego issue, right? You've been like in one industry and you're a senior, and then now you have to get a pay cut and start from bottom up, right? How does that feel, and how did you overcome that?
Well, that's a really great question, Elaine. And I'm gonna answer that question in a way that you might not expect. So first of all, because I'd started new careers before, so the UX is the fourth completely new profession that I've begun. What I know is that when you start a new profession, your income, goes from here to here. It takes an enormous collapse, and it takes years to build it back up to where it was before. So why do you do it? People change careers usually not for the money. They do it because they're looking for more fulfillment in their lives, and that's why I changed into UX. But so I didn't have any ego issues about the switch, but there was an ego problem for me, and that is that when I did my training with Nielsen Norman Group, I got really, really fantastic theory training from them. And when I got into UX, I thought I knew all about UX. I thought I was an expert. And that kind of ego and arrogance was really a big problem. It wasn't good for my career. And the reason is that I wasn't open to other people's ideas. I thought I had the best ideas. And that is, a horribly wrong decision or behavior to have in UX. You really shouldn't be looking at coming up with the ideas yourself. You should be trying to seek out those ideas from wherever you can get them, because I've learned over 5 years that I often don't have the best ideas. Other people who are not in UX and don't even have, any experience in UX can have these brilliant ideas, and a good UXer will seize on those ideas and leverage them and run with them. And that's where the power of working in groups can be so incredibly valuable to an organization. So I would say the ego did get me into trouble, but for a different reason than you might think.
Got it. So Jason, you mentioned about boot camps. Yeah, we want to maybe talk a little bit about that, because I know many people, career changes, actually go to 3 months boot camp. And then you just said that, that's not what's going to get your job. So what do you look for in a candidate when you interview them?
So I'm never looking for a polished portfolio, right? Like, I mean, the polished end result of your work is not super interesting to me. Like, I would expect that, everybody is able to produce a great looking portfolio. What I'm really looking for is the methodology behind the work. So the first thing I look for in a portfolio is I'm looking for a sense of the process that was taken on projects, whether they're school projects or whether they're, actual work experience. What is the approach that you took? To what extent did this designer try to understand their users and the challenges of their users? To what extent did they take the information that they gathered through research and try and reframe it and understand it more deeply? And then how did they generate lots of ideas before choosing particular ideas to focus on? And how did they test those ideas, as quickly as possible to understand whether they're any good? I'm looking for that type of sort of rigor and process. And I would much rather see the mistakes and the course corrections and the things that they learned that caused them to pivot than to see this really clear, linear path from problem statement down to shiny solution. So, that's kind of the first thing I look for to try and separate people out. And then the other thing I'm looking for as much as possible is some sense of experience that they can work in an environment that's similar to what our environment is, right? So working in a very small startup is very different than working in a large enterprise. When you've got a team of 10 people and they're all in the same location and you can sit around the table together and bounce ideas off one another, and it's very flat structure, that's very different than being in a very large organization distributed all over the world. So I'm looking for people who show that they're able to collaborate with larger teams and navigate a bit of that. Again, this is because I tend to be looking for more intermediate and senior career people who would have a bit more experience on their resume. So that's what I'm looking for. If it's a junior person, there's often not that kind of experience there.
And one frequent question that comes up is design challenges. Can you adjust that? Like, what if do you give design challenges to the people you interview, or how should they react to that?
So this is a really good question, because Tim and I have realized that we have two very different experiences on this. So I'll be keen for Tim to contribute to this also. But from our perspective, yes, earlier in my management and leadership career, design challenges were part of our interview process, and we would give these elaborate challenges, and we would expect candidates to pour all sorts of time and energy into these things. We realized and we felt that was misguided, and we were expecting too much from candidates in terms of the time commitment to what they were doing, and sort of the reward that we would get from that time commitment was misbalanced. We also ran into situations where we were getting candidates to focus on problems that were very closely related to the work that we were doing. And we realized that we run the risk of them bringing ideas to the table. We might not hire them, and whether on purpose or not, we end up using those ideas, and that's not cool, right? So we just felt that we didn't even want to put ourselves in that situation. We do want to get a sense for how candidates approach problem solving and how they collaborate with others. And so there's things that we can do in an interview environment that are able to simulate some of those things, right? So we will do collaborative interview sessions where, we have a number of people from the team with a candidate, and we're like, okay, we're gonna redesign an ATM experience today. Candidate, how do we approach this? Where should we start? We're here for you as your team. How do we help you? And watching people think through that process and sort of tackle that is great. Some people don't know where to go and don't know how to get started. Other people jump up, grab a whiteboard marker, and start, like, even if it's wrong, they start putting stuff on the whiteboard and start soliciting ideas and that's how we get into a rhythm, and we start working together. Those are the things I want to see. I want to see people who are like ready to jump in and orchestrate a room full of people to try and lead them through a process. So
the design,
we rely more heavily on that than giving people big homework assignments.
Okay, so it's really understanding how they think, right? Is what you're looking for. Yeah.
Yep.
How about Tim? Have you gone through a lot of design challenges?
Yeah. So yeah, I have to interview at least. I have to apply for work at least once a year, sometimes twice a year. So I do a lot of interviews, and I've experienced two types of design challenges. One is where you get given an assignment and you're told to go away and do it on your own and come back. And the other is where you get given a challenge that you have to solve. You don't know anything about that challenge before the interview. During the interview, you get given a challenge and you have to solve it right there on the spot. And the approach to those two challenges, for me, is quite different. So the take-home challenge, and I think that's probably on its way out as an approach. I think people are starting to realize why that's not worth doing. But the take-home one is I have the approach that I don't do mock-ups for those challenges. What I agree to do is do the research, the ideation phase only. I won't do the mock-ups, and also I won't do the experimentation where you go off and test those ideas. But I think at the same time, I do say that this is the process I would walk through if I was going to be doing this in real life. So show them the overall process, but I'll only do the first two parts of that, which is research and ideation. So that's actually worked for me quite well. But design challenges during the interview, that's a whole different kettle of fish. And it's and the first time I was plunged into one of those situations, I failed miserably. And as every UX person knows, failure is the secret to success. You have to fail first to get any good at anything. What I learned very, very fast in terms of solving design challenges in an interview is that you have to come to the interview equipped with a 20 or a 40-minute design thinking process. And I treat that as a facilitation process where I'm going to facilitate, hopefully there'll be more than one person interviewing me at that time. And I will basically facilitate them through solving the challenge. I won't try and solve it myself. I will just talk to them and ask them all the necessary questions. And half the time they have to make up the answers to that because they haven't even thought about what those answers might be. But I will ask them all those questions to get them, with my help, to solve that problem. And I find that's very effective too. And usually to do that, you have to have a very robust methodology, and you have to actually bring your own whiteboard to the meeting. And obviously in COVID times, you have to do that remotely. So you have to bring a mural board with you with staged phases to that design thinking challenge that you can run through in 20 minutes or 40 minutes. And I think that's really effective in an interview situation. So that's what I do in those situations.
You mean you flip the question and ask them, interview?
Well, that's our job, right? I mean, as UX people, our job is to facilitate workshops where we get a cross-functional team to solve a problem. We're not supposed to go off and just solve those problems on our own. If we can do, sometimes we have to, but invariably, if you're working alone, you're not going to solve the problem as best as you can. So bringing in other people and bringing in other ideas and bringing in other insights to a problem is always the best way to solve it. So I just do that right in the interview.
I want to sort of yes and this conversation and build on it, because I think that this is the key to people who are switching careers, right? Like folks who are mid-career have all these soft skills that they bring to the table that are super valuable. Your challenge is getting past a resume review and sort of those initial stage gates. You need to get your foot in the door, because once you get your foot in the door, you can let all of those skills shine, right, in these situations. And this is where you can really prove your worth. I see a comment from, I think it's Dean, right? Any advice on someone looking to transition into UX from customer success or account management? The advice is, make sure that you develop enough of a resume or a portfolio to get your foot in the door past those first stages. You have to stand out from other candidates because, man, as a customer success person, you are an expert at conflict resolution. As an account manager, you are an expert at facilitating conversations. How do you really highlight those skills as part of your portfolio or resume in the context of the work that we're going to be doing, you know, as designers, do a video of yourself, do like tape yourself facilitating a workshop activity, do something to stand out from people, because if you can just get your foot in the door, all of those skills that you bring is what's going to help you land the job. And all of those skills are also going to help you rise through the ranks really quickly, right? You will have to start in a more junior position because you don't have experience. But if you can get in and use all of those skills that you've developed to show your worth, you know, a lot of employers our team included, we don't care how long you're in a role. Like, I mean, I have no expectation, oh, they're going to have to be in this role for 2 years before they get a promotion. No. Like we show what are the behaviors for the next level that you're working towards. And if you can reach that in 6 months, awesome, right? We're going to move you up. So these are some of the areas that I think that the mid-career person really has an advantage if they can get past those awkward first steps.
Yeah. So Tim, like how, like you know, interviewed with many companies, right? So what are some tips on how do you succeed in the interviews? Like I've heard recurrently soft skills, right? Convincing, communication skills, and, you know, we just said facilitation skills as well.
Well, I'm probably going to sound like a broken record here, but I would say if you want to get good at interviews, you have to research. So number one, you have to research how to do well at UX interviews. Maybe I'm wrong on this, but I actually think that UX interviews are really quite unique. They're not like regular interviews. You know, there's something about them that makes them can make them very, very challenging. And there's lots of really great information content out there on how to do well at UX interviews. There's some great YouTube, there's tons of great YouTube advice clips. And for me, when I'm going back to interview for work and I'm looking for work again, I will always immerse myself. I actually usually spend about a month before when I'm looking for work. I usually spend the first month not really applying, just upping my skills and reminding myself about how to do well at interviews. So I go off and do a ton of research on UX interviews techniques and learn them. The next thing is do your research on the company. I mean, everybody's heard this, you know, research the company, try and understand what it is that they want out of the role. Now that's tricky. And I have found many, many times that what I thought they wanted after doing quite intensive research about those companies and about the role was actually not really what they wanted. You learn that in the interview sometimes, but I would always say, do that research. The next thing is I would say, bring a methodology. So when you're in an interview, it's very easy for the wheels to come off. You get nervous, you get stressed, you get a tough question, and all of a sudden you kind of feel out of control and you can't think of what to say next. And that's extremely difficult. And once you get into that fear zone, it's very hard to pull out. The way to get through that is to have a really strong methodology to interviews. And then to go back to the ABCs of what you should be doing in the interview. Whatever your methodology you worked out for yourself, just dive to that and bring it back. And that will allow you to get through the interview and be effective and to communicate clearly. So, and then the final thing I would say in interviews is never try and hide the fact that you don't know something. It's really important that if you don't know something, that you are very honest about that. You say, you know, I've never done that before, or they ask you something about your portfolio. Why did you make this design decision? And you look at it and you go, I don't know. I don't know why I did that. It's okay to be honest. But what is really important is that you show enthusiasm for learning how to get better, how to fill that gap, because nobody's perfect. But I think what makes you valuable to an employer is if you prove that you're willing to always grow and always fill those gaps and to learn from mistakes. So those are the 4 things that I would highly recommend you do if you want to be successful in UX interviews.
Great. I'll flip the question to Jason. So, you know, you interview tons of people. Can you talk about the recruiting process and how does it work for Cisco?
Yeah, so this is something that we are constantly designing and redesigning, right? And improving and iterating on. So I'll tell you about what the current process is for most roles. So we work with a recruiting partner within Cisco, and they're the ones responsible for posting the roles, sourcing candidates, and doing an initial screening. So that recruiter will spend a lot of time with me initially in really understanding the attributes of this role and the behaviors and the experience that I'm looking for. We will often go onto LinkedIn, and I will show examples of like profiles that look really interesting to me, and explain why they look interesting to me. What is it about the experience, and what is it about the roles? You know, this role is with a company of a similar size to us, and this shows me that they've worked with these types of teams, and these are, you know, whatever that might be. I'm trying to give them a really clear idea of what I'm looking for. They will also talk to me about what they should evaluate in an initial screening call. So often a recruiter will have a 15 or a 30-minute call with candidates. And so I will highlight specific things that are most important for me, for them to kind of pre-screen for, right? So if, for example, I'm looking for a manager, and I'm saying that I want previous management experience, well, I can be very specific with the recruiter that I'm like, I want them to have at least had a team of 5 people, or, you know, managed in this particular type of situation, because those things are really important to me. So they can screen out candidates in advance. For candidates that make it through, I will get a resume, and some notes from the recruiter from the screening call about what they liked or didn't like. And, you know, this is the hardest part of the process, is making a decision about somebody on a resume. Like, there is such limited information there. And so I'll look at a resume, I will look at a portfolio. Please put a link to your portfolio on your resume. People that don't, it's like crazy, because that is half of the equation. I'm trying to get a sense for how, you know, this person works. And a lot of times it's the littlest things, and it's the little gut reactions, and it's the little, you know, something on the resume that made me smile or laugh, or, you know, showed that they had a sense of humor, or showed a little bit about their personality, because we're all people, and we want to work with people that, you know, are interesting and fun to work with. And so I'll choose candidates from the resume, and we try and do cohorts. So we'll choose a number of resumes to look at. From that, we'll choose a bunch of people to bring to a screening call with me, and if I'm the hiring manager. And for my screening calls, I'm more interested in telling the candidate about the role and the opportunity, and really just only scratching the surface and learning about them. I really want to make sure that they understand the role, and that it's a good fit for what they're looking for. And yeah, I'll have a few box items that I need to make sure that, you know, they're at least a high level fit for the role. Once they get past that screening call, we do 2 small group interviews. So using a role that we're hiring for right now, we're hiring a senior manager for our UX organization. So we will do 2 group interviews where they will meet 2 or 3 members of the research team and have an interview with them, and they will meet 2 or 3 members of the design leadership team. So kind of the team that they're going to lead, and the team that they are going to be peers with in our group. And I will give both of those teams, both of those folks, very specific guidance on what they are interviewing for, right? So for the team, I'm like, you guys are looking for, you know, is this person going to inspire you? Does it look like they can help you further your career? You know, do they have deep enough knowledge about the research discipline that you're going to learn from them? And then, you know, for the peers, it's like, hey, you know, is this person going to be able to partner with you and help you prioritize what gets research and what doesn't research? Are they going to be able to inspire the rest of the organization to understand the value of research? And I'll give them very specific criteria so that we're, you know, measuring against those things. And as the cohort goes through these steps, the final step is for a leadership role, especially, we get them to do a presentation of a case study, a part of their portfolio, something that is mostly about how do they address an audience, how do they communicate their ideas, how do they deal with critique, you know, how polished of a presentation are they able to give and talk through, because it doesn't matter what level of design role you are in, you will need to present your ideas and defend your ideas and deal with critique. So, you know, that's an important part.
Let me give you a scenario, because I see this a lot. Let's say a senior career changer, their resume is like 5-10 years, like marketing, advertising, medical, right? You know, like does that resume even can even get into like on in front of you because they don't have that UX background, right? Like it will almost seem irrelevant
So
to the HR.
not completely, because like I said before, in the same way that we don't like to focus on years of service, like we really try and define behaviors, attributes, and types of experience that we're looking for. So there are opportunities where you can show that you have had certain types of experience or have certain, you know, behaviors or skill sets. But yes, like you will need some minimum level of design focused experience on your resume to even get past that initial recruiter. You know?
How minimum would that be? Can you describe it?
It really, it depends on the role, right? And so again, because we don't hire many entry level roles,
Right.
an intermediate role is going to have, you know, actual experience working in a UX role, you know, in an organization.
Right. Okay, got it. So so question to Tim. If you're gonna go back in time, what advice would you give yourself? Like if you were to do this again, like how would you switch careers? Like easier or better?
Well, if I could meet myself in 2013 or 2014, the first advice I would give myself is don't hesitate to get in. I hesitated to get into UX for quite a while. And I would say to myself then, don't hesitate, because you are going to love UX. I absolutely adore this job. And when I first started, I actually really was happy to do it for free because I just felt it was such a thrill. So that's the advice I would give myself if I met myself back then. That's not really kind of helpful to anybody, but that's just the way I feel. The second advice I would say is this, and this is something I really didn't appreciate when I was thinking about getting into UX then. So, you know, when I was trying to get into UX, I was trying to solve a problem. And the problem was learn about UX and then get a job. It's not an easy problem to solve. But I saw it as kind of two phases. One is learn, and then the other is work. But actually, I don't think it's like that. I think that the learn part happens the whole of the rest of your career. And that was a bit of an eye-opener to me. When I realized that the field of UX moves so fast, it's almost like every year you have to start again. You have to learn new methodologies. You have to learn new tools. You have to get new skills. And you better be good at being a lifelong learner, because you're going to be, in order to keep up with other people who are coming into the profession, you have to keep training and keep bettering yourself. So that's the other advice I would give myself then. Be prepared to learn and be prepared to be a lifelong student in this profession, because you're never going to be successful if you just learn something and then just sit back and then just work from then on.
Yeah. So maybe I'll ask Jason this. Like, since you've been in the industry for quite a long while, and Tim mentioned that things change, you know, over the years. Like, what has changed? You know, the 25 years you've been in the industry.
So
yeah.
UX and design has really grown into an actual discipline, right? We in our organization, I lead the design practice, and I report to the general manager, and the head of engineering and the head of product management are my peers. This is the first time in my career that I've worked in that type of situation, and I think it shows how the design discipline is maturing in organizations. They realize it's critically important. You know, we have a seat at the table, as we like to say, and the businesses are recognizing not only the value that we bring, but they're also recognizing more and more how and when to engage with design in order to pull the most value from us. So we're really seeing that we are a much bigger part of the product development process, and certainly in Cisco, we are developing a lot of new skills. Like there's a lot of focus on design thinking and facilitation and collaboration and workshops. We're developing a lot of specialty roles, right? We have design producers now on our team, which are also known as design program managers or UX program managers. There's a million names for them, but these are people who are solely responsible for helping teams move through the design process and managing stakeholders on the outside and managing, design resources within the team. These are new roles that we're only just seeing. We're seeing skills like storytelling becoming so critically important. So for us, we are now using storytelling and storyboarding as a way of forming we call it a contract with our peers in engineering and product management at the very beginning of a project. So we're able to storyboard out what the customer's problem is, why it's difficult for them to do this thing today, and what a solution state would look like. And we use that as a contract with our peers to say, this is when we will know we are done, is when we are seeing this type of experience, as an end result. So a lot of maturity in design, just in the past, 5 or so years. It's been incredible.
Yeah, I see a lot of career changers or junior people are confused about design thinking and UX. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sorry, say it again.
I find a lot of career changers or junior designers confused about design thinking and UX because you rarely hire a design thinker, right? All the job descriptions are UX designer, right? Or user researcher. So how does everything fit in your head, in your mind?
Design thinking is just another methodology or process that we can follow as part of design. And the way that I look at design thinking, it's about starting with empathy to, as crazy as it sounds, often just identifying who we're solving for is a massive step forward on a project or within a team. So being really clear about who we're solving for, taking as much time as we can to really understand what their challenges are, not by asking them what they want, by really, really trying to figure out what they need, right? And helping them understand what they need. Then based on those needs, we need to prioritize which of those things are most important to solve. What's going to move the needle the most for this person? Then it comes with, ideas like reframing problems and trying to get to underlying problems. And when we start generating ideas for solutions, we have this notion of going wide before going narrow. So too often teams just latch onto the first good idea that pops up and that's what they run with. Well, we have a sense of discipline in a design thinking practice where we're going to generate lots of ideas, crazy ideas, tangential ideas. And out of all those ideas, we often say we got to get rid of all the bad ideas to find the good ideas. Out of all those ideas, we'll zero in on possibly some real unique solutions. And then it's all about testing those ideas as quickly as possible with those people that you had identified in the beginning that you were solving for. And it's this loop of a process that I think is known as design thinking, where people I think have a misunderstanding about design thinking is they think it's all about post-it notes. They think it's all about workshops. They think it's all about sort of boot camp type activities. And those are scenarios where, yes, you can apply this type of methodology and these practices, but the most successful design thinking I see is when it's a team who is applying this process as a rigor over days and days and weeks of toiling over these problems and understanding the problems and working through ideas. And it has nothing to do with a workshop half the time.
Yeah, a lot of executives ask for like half-day design thinking workshop with post-it notes, right? Okay, so what kind of mistakes do you see UX people make in their work, Jason? And what advice would you give?
Man, there's lots of mistakes. I think that not, like I said, not really understanding who we're solving for. As much as that sounds so basic, we do not spend the time to be really clear on that. And that can be, understanding a particular type of user or understanding a market segment that we might be going for. What's really, really relevant for us is we serve large enterprise customers down to very small, small business mom and pop shop type customers. understanding where on that spectrum we're actually targeting with the solutions that we're bringing to market is really meaningful, and we often don't dial it in, as specific as we should.
Yeah.
Taking engineers and product managers solutions and just running blindly with them, I see that a lot. Like designers, especially younger designers, they feel this tremendous pressure from the teams that they're working with to act quickly, and oftentimes teams are just telling them, this is how it should be done, and they're not applying our process, right? They're not going wide, they're not understanding the problem, they quickly fall out of the process that we've all learned. Crazy thing is, I had a startup kind of midway through my career, and I lost sight of my process. Our startup failed because we were solving a problem that didn't exist in the market, because we thought we were smarter than everybody else, and we weren't spending the time to understand the customers we were trying to build for. And we raised a bunch of money and built a product that didn't fit into the market as a result. And that was super humbling for me. And it was probably the biggest learning experience of my career, because I recognized, my God, what did I just do? Me and the two founders, there was three of us, and we were all UX professionals, and we fell into this massive trap.
Wow. Okay. So how about Cisco's approach to UX? Like, how has it changed in the past few years?
Yeah, the biggest change, and I mentioned a bunch of sort of programs and things that we're doing, but the biggest change is we are involved very, very early now in projects. And so we are the owners of the customer need. So it's up to us to become the experts in understanding the users that we're serving, and deriving their needs. And again, not by asking them, what they want, but really by figuring out what they need. And we balance the other side of the business, where product management and our sales organizations are constantly coming and making requests for what we need to build in our products and features we need to add. And we need to balance those requests with the actual customer needs. So as we field these requests, we're responsible for making sure that the need exists as they are presenting it. And I think, storytelling, like I said, storytelling is such a powerful tool, especially in big organizations. People talk with buzzwords, people show architectural diagrams, they show, business PowerPoint slides, and it often doesn't really mean anything to the people who are actually tasked with building the products. And so more and more, we are trying to use simple storyboarding tools and videos and sort of a day in the life of a customer type storytelling, to make it really clear to all the teams that are building, who are we serving and what are we trying to solve for them.
Okay, well, we have 15 minutes left, and we have some infinity diagram going on in the background right now. So I've asked our team to, along with the participants, group together what questions that they have been, typing up. And we want to open this to the floor now, and maybe just pick up the questions that you were asking and ask it to Tim and Jason. Anyone? Here's the time. And we often tell people, hey, skip the recruiters and the HR people, go directly to the people who are hiring. And this is your chance now, okay?
I see a question here from Wendy Sherman. I'm just scanning the chat. She says, for Tim, how does UX compare to graphic design or visual? I have 30 years experience in graphic design. Will I love UX? So that's two questions. I think this is, the first part of it is really indicative of the confusion over UX versus graphic design or visual design. Graphic design and visual design is one part of UX. I would say it's an very important part, but I would say that it's actually a fairly small part of UX. It comes towards the end of any UX project, in my mind, because you want to be getting through the empathy stage, the discovery stage, the ideation stage, the experimentation stage, the testing stage, before you really spend any effort on the visual design or graphic design, because the visual design and graphic design is very work intensive. And so for me, in my process, I will not do any mock-ups, real mock-ups, until the very, very end, until I'm really confident that, you know, I've tested with sketches, I've shared my sketches with my stakeholders, I've received all their ideas. I'm not confident in doing mock-ups until I've gotten through with all that other stuff first. So the second question is, will you love UX? Well, that depends. Now, one thing I do know about designers of any sort, whether you're a visual designer or whether you're designing machines, or whether you're designing furniture, design is supposed to be about solving needs for the consumer of whatever it is that you're offering them. So if you think that that's an important part of any design discipline, then you're going to like UX, because UX is all about solving the need and finding the solution to the need. If you were a designer for 30 years, my guess is that you were very good at it. And also you probably have spent a lot of time solving needs before you even started putting pixels on the screen, in which case you probably would be very good at UX. But if your instinct, whenever you get faced with a problem, is immediately to go to your screen and start, you know, mood boarding or whatever, then you're probably going to be in for a bit of a shock if you get into UX, because that's definitely, you don't want to do that. So that's my opinion. So that's one question. Thank you, Wendy, for asking it. I really appreciate that question.
Okay, great. We have Maureen with her hands up. Maureen, you want to talk?
Yeah, this is for any speakers. Just as I'm preparing to send out interviews, and how many should I expect to send out in a world where we hear that bots are and software is scanning the resumes for keywords? How can I ensure mine is seen in the sea of applicants?
Well, I'll answer from my perspective and say that we don't use bots and scanning. You know, we're a massive organization, and we don't believe in that. We have actual recruiters and people looking at candidates and looking at resumes, and we also spend a lot of time on LinkedIn, you know, looking for the types of people that we're interested in. So I don't know how prevalent the technology is and the bots are out there. I have very little experience with that.
One suggestion: turn on your camera so hires can see your face, right? if Jason wants to hire somebody, he needs to recognize you. Okay. Anybody else wants to, you know, ask their question live? I think we have a shy crowd here. Okay, maybe we have Daniel. Do you want to pick up some of these that sounded interesting? Daniel? Oh, we can't hear you.
Yes, so we did a little bit of exercise at the back end right here and try to group similar questions onto group. So first I would like to ask our guest speaker, was your first paid UX engagement a freelance, contract, or full-time role?
Okay, yeah. I guess that's probably addressed to me, but it could be addressed to Jason too. I don't know, when he first started in UX, I'm not even sure they called it UX. They might have called it something else. But for me, my first paid engagement was a contract. Now, I'd like to say something else. For me, there's two types of full-time work. There's contract full-time work and there's permanent full-time work. That may not be how other people describe it. But when I work on a contract, I'm working full-time, more than full-time. I'm probably working, you know, sometimes I'm working 10 hours a day. Sometimes I'm even working 7 days a week. I try to avoid that, but it does happen. So I'm full-time, but I'm not permanent. I'm only there to do I'm basically brought in to solve a problem. And usually that problem is either, do something separate from the other UX team, or we don't have a UX team and we suddenly need UX. We don't have any UX people and we suddenly need UX, but we don't need a permanent UX person. We just need them for this temporary period. But either way, I'm brought in to just solve a resource issue problem. And then when the resource is no longer needed by the organization, my contract is finished. And when they give me the contract, it'll be for a certain period of time. And they'll say, it's 12 months or 6 months or whatever. The project itself may not fit the contract. So sometimes the contract ends early because I've finished sooner than they expected. Sometimes the project takes longer than the contract term, so they'll extend the contract. But anyway, my first position was contract, and I find actually if you're getting hired to do work in the public sector, so government organizations, it's unlikely you'll be ever offered a permanent position there. You'll only ever be offered contract positions. And that was what was my first opportunity was with a governmental style organization. And it's just been like that ever since. All the offers that I get tend to be for contract work. So that's what I take.
Great. So I see a huge cluster here, interviewing process. Anybody wants to ask this? Or Danny, you want to pick one?
Sure, we can pick one. Let's see. There was one that somebody asked, well, this is quite interesting because somebody asked in Switzerland, we mostly have 1 to 2 interviews. Why is it in Canada that we mostly have 3 to 5 interviews and probation phase? Is this not a bit of a waste of time, probably?
That's a really good question. I think that 3 to 5 interviews can often be on the light side in North America as well. I see organizations like, Google, Amazon, some of those companies actually have a very structured interview process with many more than 3 to 5 interviews. I think we've tried to find that balance of making sure that we can assess the candidate, across the things that we're looking for, make sure that we can give enough members of the team access to a candidate so that we have a diverse set of feedback from people on the team, and frankly also make sure that the candidate has a chance to meet a good cross-section of people within the organization. So we think 3 to 5 interviews is actually beneficial to both sides of the equation, and we try to really land at 3 interviews and only go over 3 interviews, I guess with the screening call it's 4 interviews total. We only go over 4 interviews if we have a real hard tiebreaker between 2 candidates, or there's just some bit of information that we're really dying to dig deeper in with a candidate, or if the candidate wants to learn more information about the role as well, we would book a 5th.
I'm wondering if it's because for multinationals, you have large teams, then there's more interviews. For smaller companies, fewer interviews. Maybe that's why. Okay, I'm weird about the time. It's almost 7:30. I know it's dinner time, for a lot of us. Maybe just one last question, and I see Aika has her hands up. You want to ask this question?
Yes, thank you very much. I'm very, very glad you saw that. I actually have 2 questions in one. I'm curious about your project process.
It's really soft and it's very far away.
Okay, I'm going to try to increase the. Can you hear better?
Okay.
Okay, perfect. I'm curious about project process in Cisco. How does a project start? Do you receive a brief or from marketing or engineers? And how defined a brief is? And how do you work that process? Do UX researchers work together, engineers work together, designers work together, or is it more of an agile environment?
Yeah, so the execution aspect of building out the solution is very agile, and so the engineering teams will take a concept, and we will break that concept into detailed designs and feed it into an agile process with engineering. But the discovery and the definition phase of our process is very collaborative between UX, product management, and architecture from the engineering perspective. We start by identifying an opportunity in the market where we see a problem or a market transition or an opportunity to solve problems for people. And based on that opportunity, we'll start doing UX research to really uncover the needs of the people that we're going to be solving for. And we do what's called a business commit, which is a chance for us to go to the business and say, hey, here's the problem we're seeing in the market. Here's how big it is, we think it is. Here's why it's worth solving for the customer. Here's why it's worth solving for the business. And the business in turn says, okay, yeah, we think this is worth investing time and energy in. Go off and continue to explore it. From there, we will continue to start developing concepts for how we can solve these problems. And we'll get to a point where it's what's called an execution commit. And that's at a point where we know enough about the solution that our engineering organization can actually figure out how they would build it, how much of a team that they would need, how long it would take. And then at the execution commit or the engineering commit is where the business is saying, yeah, we're willing to spend that amount of time and effort and money for teams to go off and build that solution. So that's kind of the general process at a high level. It's obviously nuanced and different based on different projects and different teams, but that's the high level approach.
Okay, so well, we're already at half hour, so don't worry, we got your questions, and this is actually our user research, so we know what you guys want, right? So maybe the next event we can organize something that is more catered to what most people are asking about. Okay, well, great, thank you so much, Jason and Tim. Did you have one more thing to say?
Yeah, I'd like to say to everybody who feels like they didn't get a chance to ask a question, I'm happy if you want to reach out to me through LinkedIn and ask me that question directly. So go ahead and do that if you feel like I can answer a question for you. I'm available to answer those questions.
Thanks.
The same for me. Please connect. And I pose a question to all of you. How can someone in my position and in an organization and a team, what are the things that we can do to help you and break through these early career opportunities? And don't say just hire me, or don't say just hire more early career people. You've heard my perspective and the challenges that I have in my role. Tell me how we can work together to solve this.
Yeah, we have invited 8 senior advisors to IxDA Vancouver, and we'll meet once in a while to get their feedback and brainstorm how to solve these issues like in our industry. Okay, thank you so much, everyone, and see you next month.
Thank you, Elaine.
Okay, bye. Yeah, follow our Facebook and LinkedIn group, and we also have a Slack group, okay? All right, thanks, bye-bye.
Thank you, bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye,
Thanks so much.
Bye, everybody.